Indiana Fever president talks about the future of America's fastest-growing team. So Sportico talks to Kelly Krauskopf, the president of the Indiana Fever, about the future of America's fastest-growing team. There was a very interesting article that Sportico came out with, where they interviewed Kelly Krauskopf, and she was heavily involved in the Indiana Fever's off-season moves. She and Amber Cox built almost an entirely new roster around Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and even Lexi Hull. It was a whirlwind shift for the Indiana Fever, as it was for many teams in the WNBA. This article goes into their off-season moves, including how the team was involved in trades and free agency, how Kelly Krauskopf feels about the record-setting year they had last season, and where they are heading from here. Krauskopf even refers to the Indiana Fever as America's team. The article starts with a big question. As you approach free agency and trades this offseason, how involved were the Fever's franchise players, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell, in personnel decisions? It makes me wonder if they were asking how involved Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Caitlin Clark were in the trades of players like Nalissa Smith. But Krauskopf is smart. She keeps it professional. Here's how she answered. You always want to pick the brains of players. I did it with Tamika Catchings and others, so I think it's smart business to inform some of your key players about the targets we're looking at. It's not necessarily about asking for their sign-off. It's more about having a discussion together. We had great synergy in how we communicated and had those conversations. We also had eager players in our locker room who wanted to be a part of the recruiting process and help bring new players to Indianapolis. Every single player we brought in was an intentional move to add to the vision we had for a successful blueprint. Aaliyah Boston even mentioned in an interview that players were consulted about who the team brought in. I think locker room chemistry was a key focus for the Indiana Fever. They needed veteran players to guide this young team, especially with the playoffs in mind. Last season, they were swept in the first round, but making the playoff at all was a huge accomplishment for a team that hadn't been there in almost a decade. The truth is, when you have a franchise player who is essentially the face of the league, like many NBA players, including Rashad McCants, have said about Caitlin Clark, you have to ensure they're happy. Caitlin Clark is, for lack of a better term, the golden goose of the WNBA. If anything happened to her, the league would suffer. Knock on wood. We don't want that to happen because we all want the WNBA to succeed. So, it's no surprise that Clark was involved in these discussions, along with Boston and Mitchell. It was a collaborative effort and a reflection of the Fever's team culture. The article also touches on the new WNBA-CBA negotiations and how they might impact the future of the team. If you're not familiar with the new CBA, it's the contract where media outlets agree on a financial deal with the WNBA, which determines how the league will allocate money for player salaries, marketing, and other expenses. In 2026, with the explosion of the WNBA's popularity, these CBA negotiations are expected to be drastic compared to previous agreements. Interestingly, by 2026, every single WNBA player who is not on a rookie contract, except Lexi Brown and Kalani Brown, will be a free agent. That means we're looking at what I call the Wild West of the WNBA, a total free agency bonanza. Many of the signings in 2025 could be temporary, setting up for major moves in 2026. So, Sportico asked Krauskopf how the looming CBA negotiations affected roster management. She responded, "It's not unusual. We've been through this before." Everyone in the league understood that many of these contracts were going to be short-term deals, and we'll be right back at it again. This was an opportunity to put together a group of players who were hungry to win, wanted to prove something as individual players, and wanted to be here. Those were the three most important factors. If we have a good season, we'll be able to attract even more players next year. I've been saying this for a while. People have questioned why the Indiana Fever traded away their number 8 draft pick instead of focusing on young talent. But with 2026 free agency coming up and the CBA negotiations looming, their strategy seems clear. Build a team with a winning mindset now to attract star free agents in the next offseason. This also seems to be the strategy of the Chicago Sky are following by signing Ariel Atkins and trading away their first-round pick. The Sky haven't had the best reputation in terms of player treatment, but they're looking to rebuild that with franchise stars like Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. Their goal is to establish a winning culture that can attract top players in 2026. Meanwhile, other teams like the Washington Mystics seem to be in rebuild mode, possibly even tanking. The Connecticut Sun are also focusing on development through draft picks and young players. Now, I won't go through the entire Sportico article, but I highly recommend checking it out. I'll link in the description below if you want to read the full piece. One of the more interesting parts of the interview was when Sportico asked Krauskopf about her comments in her introductory press conference, where she compared the Fever to a company like Apple. She didn't explicitly call them America's team, but the idea was there. Here's how she responded. There's a huge new generation of basketball fans that have come into our building and are consuming the Fever. Only about 5% of our attendees also went to a Pacers game. For instance, a third of our attendees were from outside the state of Indiana. That's some crazy momentum. We have national reach. Can you be America's team? I don't take that lightly, but we had fans from 29 states and even a few from other countries coming to Indiana just to see our team, and we expect that to continue. We're going to have a supply and demand issue. To be completely honest, honestly, I'm surprised she only counted 29 states. I would bet that every single state had at least some fans attending Fever games. And I guarantee even more will show up next season because I have never seen a WNBA season so highly anticipated. It's a shame the season is only 4 months long. She also mentioned that the wait list for season ticket holders is at an all-time high. A brand study from December even ranked the WNBA as one of the fastest growing brands of 2024, ahead of Ben & Jerry's. And if you're beating ice cream in America, that's a flex. Finally, Sportico asked Krauskopf what she expects from Fever fans this season. She answered, "You're going to see a very hungry group of players. This is an extremely competitive team. Everybody likes to talk about competitiveness, but these players live it. We also added players who love playing up-tempo, running the floor, and scoring in transition. So I think you're going to see a fast-paced, exciting brand of basketball." That's great news, considering Kelsey Mitchell is one of the fastest players in the WNBA. Though I'd say Kennedy Carter might be a little quicker. Mitchell used to play a lot of ISO ball, but she's adjusted her game. Once the Fever found their tempo and rhythm last season, they became almost unstoppable in transition. Caitlin Clark throwing full-court dimes to Mitchell, and Alyssa Smith was electric. Amber Cox and Kelly Krauskopf clearly had a vision when building this roster, adding veterans like wnba, defensive powerhouses like Natasha Howard, and fast players like Sophie Cunningham.
If you've made it this far and are enjoying the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. We know watching this video takes some of your time, and we appreciate you.